In all likelihood, Giannis Antetokounmpo would still probably prefer to stay in Milwaukee. He spent his whole NBA life in this city where he's won an NBA championship, and there's just something special about superstars spending their entire careers with a single fan base. Just think of how Dirk Nowitzki became the face of the Dallas Mavericks franchise, and how those same Mavs fans hated Nico Harrison for depriving them of the chance to elevate Luka Doncic into those same levels. Basically, no front office, especially from a small market team, would want to straight up trade their franchise player in his prime, so we could probably be certain that the Bucks aren't just gonna trade Giannis until they're basically forced to. Also in the past, we knew that Giannis was never going to put unnecessary pressure on the Bucks. That was until he knew that he had no other way of winning a second championship in Milwaukee. So in 2023, Giannis spoke to the media about how winning another NBA title is more important for him than simply being on the same team for 20 years. So that same offseason, the Bucks hired Giannis' preferred coach Adrian Griffin to replace Mike Budenholzer, and they also followed that up with a blockbuster trade for Damian Lillard. And unsurprisingly, Giannis signed a 3-year extension soon after. But as we all know, Coach Griffin only lasted 44 games before getting fired, and while Damian Lillard still played like an all-star this season, he's basically declined from his peak in Portland. For back-to-back seasons now, Milwaukee has been eliminated by the Indiana Pacers in the first round, and in Game 4 of this year's series, we saw Dame suffer a torn Achilles, which in all likelihood marks the end of his superstar era, as well as the end of any hope for the Giannis and Lillard tandem to win an NBA title together. Well, for sure, injuries do account for Milwaukee's disappointing playoff runs the past few years, but there also aren't a lot of indications that a healthy version of this team was really capable of winning at all either. Even when Lillard and Giannis played together on the floor this season, Milwaukee still just posted an underwhelming plus 4.7 net rating. And for context, looking at potential championship tandems this season, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were plus 8.1 together, Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley are plus 11.1, while SGA and Jalen Williams blew everyone out at plus 13.1. Sure, the Cavs, the Celtics, and the Thunder all had better supporting cast than what Lillard and Giannis had in Milwaukee, but the problem is, it's also not like the Bucks were in any sort of position to improve their roster situation anytime soon. Because of their acquisition of Drew Holiday in 2020 and the Damian Lillard trade in 2023, the Bucks don't have a first-round pick until the year 2030. And even though they had some draft picks to sweeten any potential trade this offseason, it's not like teams are gonna be lining up to trade for Kyle Kuzma or an injured 35-year-old Damian Lillard. Well, assuming Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton pick up their player options for next season amounting to a combined $22.9 million, the Bucks will still have to pay Lillard, Giannis, and Kuzma a combined $153.5 million, which is already close to the projected salary cap for next year worth $154.6 million. And that is even before they decide what they want to do with Brook Lopez, who at 37 years old is also an unrestricted free agent. Well, the Bucks were able to land Gary Trent Jr. for the minimum last offseason because they have a starting job to offer him, and again, that's because the Bucks are too much of a top-heavy roster. Overall, that's where the Milwaukee Bucks are right now. They're a team that's capped out and that also doesn't have a lot to offer in terms of draft or player assets. If they want to continue building a winning team around Giannis, I think their best bet would probably be to try and trade their 2031 first-round pick alongside Kyle Kuzma and maybe another player to potentially bring in a reliable third scorer. Or maybe, if they try to really be aggressive, they could flip Damian Lillard for a more expensive co-star but who's at least gonna be potentially healthy next season, like Paul George or even Bradley Beal if he waives his no-trade clause. Nonetheless, given their current situation, it's just gonna be hard for the Milwaukee Bucks to effectively compete moving forward. Well, even without catching the Cavs or the Celtics, the Bucks are already just a middle-of-the-pack Eastern Conference team who's getting passed by the Pacers and the Knicks, while the Detroit Pistons or even the Orlando Magic have young emerging rosters that are ready to surpass the Bucks as early as next season. Basically, at this point, simply having Giannis can't be the answer for Milwaukee anymore because as Giannis said himself, he wants to win another championship more than he wants to spend his whole career with one team. So maybe it is really time for Giannis to force a trade out of Milwaukee. And I think that's also what makes the Damian Lillard injury such a huge factor here, because if he was healthy, him and Giannis might have been able to make some tweaks this summer, and maybe a free agent signing here or a trade there could actually put this team back into the mix for an NBA title next season. But then, Giannis has already seen what life without Damian Lillard looks like in Milwaukee. In this recent series against Indiana, Giannis scored 165 points while his highest scoring teammate Gary Trent Jr. only scored 94 points. this Milwaukee Bucks roster is so depleted that Giannis staying with them would just appear to be a waste of his prime. Well, Giannis is already 30 years old, and while he's still a top 5 player in the NBA today, the reality is, bigger players like him who heavily rely on athleticism don't always have the staying power on top. Overall, teams would just be willing to pay significantly more for this current version of Giannis than the version of him 3 years later. Well, sure, the 3-year extension that Giannis signed in 2023 will kick in beginning July this year, which means Milwaukee could still run it back with him once or twice more before he could opt out of his contract in 2027. But by next year, Giannis will only have one guaranteed season left on his deal, so if you're the Bucks, why wait one more year before trading him? No team would want to give up a ton of assets for a 1-year rental. If you would remember, the Toronto Raptors only attached one first-round pick with DeMar DeRozan to acquire Kawhi Leonard back in 2018. So for Milwaukee, doing that trade this summer would be the best chance for them to capitalize on those asset-rich teams that would be willing to make a jump for Giannis. Well, one obvious example would be the Houston Rockets. They have a number 2 seed built mostly around young players, but also around one of the most stacked collections of future draft assets in the entire NBA. The Rockets could easily put together a tempting package consisting of their 2025 lottery pick, together with unprotected 2027 and 2029 first-rounders from Phoenix, together with a combination of players which could include Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr., Reed Shepherd, and Cam Whitmore, plus Dylan Brooks and Jock Landale to match salaries. Combine Giannis' talents with that of Alperen Şengün and that of Amen Thompson, together with other young role players on the roster, and you have a Houston Rockets team that should be capable of competing on top of the Western Conference for a good part of the next half-decade. Another potential trade partner here are the Brooklyn Nets. While it might look a bit too early in the Nets rebuild for them to go after a superstar of Giannis' caliber, but if it is true that Giannis is really their plan A this offseason, Brooklyn is a team that has more than enough draft assets to go after him. Plus, they're also the only team in the NBA which projects to have max cap space this coming offseason. That should allow Brooklyn not only to land Giannis, but also to even swallow other Milwaukee contracts, including that of Kyle Kuzma, who they can use as another trade chip. Well, Brooklyn doesn't have the type of young talent that Houston can offer in a trade, but their future draft stash includes 4 first-round picks from this year's draft, an unprotected pick swap from Phoenix in 2028, 3 unprotected future first-rounders from the Knicks, and all of their own future draft picks. They could package up to 9 of those first-rounders alongside talented young scorer Cam Thomas, who could be included in a sign-and-trade, together with utility wing Cam Johnson and his $22.5 million salary for next season to be used as a salary filler. This could all be tempting for Milwaukee, especially considering Brooklyn's own pick this year will be in the lottery and has a pretty good chance of landing in the top 6, which could potentially give the Bucks the chance to draft a new franchise player in addition to all those future picks they'll be receiving. Well, no other team could probably outbid Brooklyn and Houston for Giannis, that is unless the OKC Thunder decides to get into the mix. But as a Thunder fan, I'm just really skeptical that they would pursue Giannis once the price becomes clear, especially considering they would 99% have to give up one of Chet Holmgren or Jalen Williams in a deal. However, one intriguing yet realistic landing spot for Giannis I think would be the San Antonio Spurs. While the Spurs wouldn't be willing to include Stephon Castle in the trade, but they could still offer Milwaukee a high-value package consisting of Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and Jeremy Sohan, together with any of their 2 2025 lottery picks, an unprotected 2027 pick from Atlanta, their first-rounders in 2029 and 2031, plus several future pick swaps. Well, it wouldn't be necessary for the Spurs to do this outright, but then who says no to a lineup of De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Harrison Barnes, Giannis, and Victor Wembanyama, which easily projects to have championship ceiling from day one. Plus, Giannis only has 2 years left guaranteed in his contract, which will expire in the summer of 2027, which is also when Wembanyama's next contract will kick in. Meaning, trading for Giannis this offseason basically allows Wembanyama to experience championship contention earlier than expected, without San Antonio even needing to sacrifice the team's cap situation for the near future. Those teams, such as Brooklyn, Houston, and San Antonio, will be obvious suitors for Giannis, but expect the Bucks to get calls from all 29 teams if they make him available. Again, if Giannis was satisfied just losing in the first round from this point on, Bucks fans would probably be comfortable letting him stay, and to be real, Giannis could end all this talk by simply saying that he would retire in Milwaukee regardless if they keep losing early in the postseason. But until that happens, the Bucks front office will be forced to live with the pressure that comes with trying to cater to a superstar who's eager to continue winning championships now. For sure, life after Giannis won't be easy for Milwaukee, but the substantial package that they could get for him could at least set up a promising new era for the Bucks. This franchise successfully spent a half-decade contending for NBA titles with Giannis, and the cost of doing so was definitely worth it, given they won an NBA title in 2021. But they now have to pay the price for that success, and it just happens that trading Giannis is an inevitable part of that. And again, this isn't going to be easy for Giannis either, but asking for a trade right now is the right move if he really wants to win that second NBA title. But which team do you think actually lands Giannis if he gets traded by the Bucks? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this has been Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.